Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name's Malcolm Groves. I'm the principal consultant here at Code Partners. If you're not aware, Code Partners, we're based here in Asia Pac. We've got staff around the region. And our main focus is around helping companies with development and DevOps teams sort of improve their productivity and the quality of the software that they're building. We've been doing this with large companies, small companies, medium-sized companies for many years now with all sorts of technologies. On the next slide, I think you can see some of those technologies. Increasingly, however, we're starting to see more of our customers engage with low-code platforms and technologies from different vendors. And in many cases, they're coming away from that experience feeling maybe a little bit disappointed that perhaps the results didn't really live up to the promises, the low-code promises. And so that's kind of the driver behind why we arranged today's webinar with the Lansa folks to talk about some of the key things really that you should be looking for in a low-code platform to make sure that you actually see some of the benefit that you heard about in those low-code presentations when you're and promises. So with that in mind, I want to introduce the other two speakers today. We have Marjanna Frank. Do you want to give us a wave, Marjanna?
Yes, okay, you want me to start?
No, not quite yet. Marjanna Frank and also Fawzy Fadzlillah. Hey, Fawzy, who run the Lansa business in Australia and Asia, respectively. So Marjanna looks after ANZ, Fawzy looks after Asia. Marjanna's going to kick us off talking about sort of the issues and why maybe sometimes low-code doesn't live up to some of the promises and what you really should be looking for in terms of trying to make sure that it does. And then Fawzy's going to take that and make it more concrete by giving us some demonstrations of, in this case, how the Lansa low-code platform implements some of these things. Yeah. Just some housekeeping. We'll be taking questions during the session in the Q&A panel in Zoom. So feel free to ask whatever questions you like in there. And also at the end, we'll come back and do a live Q&A, talk through maybe some of the common questions or if there's extra questions that are happening. Yeah. So anyway, you didn't come here to hear me rabbit on about this stuff. So I'll hand over to Marjanna to take us through that first part of the webinar.
Hi, Malcolm. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to switch off my video just to show some, to save some bandwidth. Thanks. So the agenda for today, first of all, what is low code? Who are the players? And what varieties exist? And most of all, why would you care? Next, we will have a look at the 5 key criteria for low-code success. And for each of those criteria, we will discuss why the criterion or that capability is important. And then next, we will have a look at how is it implemented in Lansa. And then, as Malcolm already said, after that, we have a demonstration of our low-code development platform, Visual Lansa, and then Q&A. Well, what is low-code? The term low-code was coined in 2014 by analyst firm Forrester, and it was originally defined as platforms that enable rapid delivery of business applications with a minimum of hand coding and minimal upfront investment in setup, training, and deployment. And according to Forrester, the 2 main features were a graphical drag and drop interface and model-driven logic. Now, initially, low-code was geared at citizen developers, such as business analysts and power users, without formal IT or programming training. However, in 2017, only 3 years later, Forrester corrected its earlier definition and released a new report called Fork in the Road. And this separated the low-code offerings in 2 distinct segments, one for IT professionals and one for citizen developers. Now, unfortunately, even today, there's still a lot of misunderstandings, and many people still think that low code is for amateurs or citizen developers. As a result, many professional developers are skeptical to have a look at low code. And also, citizen developers often have too simple expectations of low code. Separation into professional and citizen segments is not the only difference that set low code's offerings apart. I don't want to make this a too theoretical or academic presentation, but knowing the varieties that are available may help you in your research. Now, firstly, we have the general purpose low code platforms. These are intended for building a wide variety of applications. You can use these platforms instead of Java, .NET, C++, and other established coding languages. They're not just for building simple front-end apps, but also for more complex line of business solutions. Lansa, by the way, fits in that category. Next, we have low-code tools for database apps. These are intended for building applications that query and present data stored in a database. Now, some of these tools may have data definition features, but most of them focus on existing data. Basically, there are simple dashboard query and reporting tools, but nowadays with a mobile interface. Next, we have low-code platforms for mobile apps. These vendors are mostly from the time when native mobile apps were a must, and their focus is on mobile widgets and deployment in the Apple and Android app stores. Now, with HTML having progressed tremendously over the last few years, mobile apps that previously required native development or native deployment can now often be accomplished with progressive web apps. And as a result, the importance of this segment is diminishing. Or rather, this mobile segment is kind of dissolving in the other segment because nowadays all vendors also offer mobile apps. Next is low code for process apps. These typically focus on approval procedures and provide a mix of work routing and e-signatures. And there's low code platforms for request handling apps. These deal with accepting and tracking user requests and assigning them for fulfillment. For example, change requests for an ERP solution or a website. A major player in this category is Jira Atlassian, which also calls itself low code. Then there are a number of niche and no-code platforms that focus on specific applications, for example, on event management, on timesheets, staff scheduling, expense claims. They're numerous. Now, for these last three categories, the process apps, request handling, and niche apps, you're actually not building a solution. The solution is already there, and you're basically configuring and customizing it. Salesforce, for example, also calls itself a low-code platform. Now, you can indeed create objects, add fields, and change rules in Salesforce, but you wouldn't use it for anything else but the CRM. Now, of course, you can use general purpose low-code for all of the other categories, but if all that you want is a simple query app or display a dashboard, then a general purpose low-code tool might be a bit of an overkill. Why care about low code? Why not just continue with traditional development languages and tools? Well, firstly, there are business pressures. Businesses may want to improve customer service and enter new markets. This requires them to differentiate themselves from the rest of the pack. If you use the same plain vanilla off-the-shelf software system as your competitors, you may struggle to differentiate. And even just to stay afloat in a changing market can be challenging. For example, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of brick and mortar stores looked at low code to add online selling capabilities to their systems. Also, many organizations now look at low code to modernize and extend their existing core systems. For example, they may have all the core functionality in place, but they want to give their customers and dealers and brokers a web portal to manage their business. From an IT point of view, the reasons for low code are, software technology has become increasingly complex. In the old days, developers only had to use 1 or 2 programming languages. Today, the requirements often include a whole stack of technologies like HTML, JavaScript, XML, web services, .NET, Java. Now, full stack developers are hard to find. And even when you find them, it may take months before they understand your business. To avoid having to wait, many business users may resort to shadow IT, often undocumented. And once that starts to happen, it's hard for IT to gain back control. Therefore, a lot of organizations are looking nowadays at low-code tools to help their IT team to become more productive. Now, narrowing it down to general purpose low-code tools for IT professionals, what are the key criteria for success? And also keep in mind, not just for developing applications productively, but also for maintaining them. Now, based on experience from IT teams over the world, we would say it's a high-level language, a business rules engine, cross-platform deployment, availability of a framework, application framework, and any-to-any integration. Now we will delve into each of these criteria and explore what they mean. Why would you need a high-level language? Well, model-driven drag-and-drop development is great, fast and intuitive. However, you are likely to hit the limitations of it soon as functionality gets complex. You simply cannot drag and drop a whole insurance system or a banking system or an ERP system together. At some point, you need to code. In most low-code platforms, developers need to revert to traditional software development technologies outside the low-code platform when they reach that limitation. In other words, they start using third-party languages and technologies. At that point, you lose all productivity gains of low code. You're likely to end up with a patchwork of tools on the side. Now, these tools may include cheap or even free open source code, but eventually such a stack will become hard to manage and therefore expensive. Also, the integration between the low-code platform and the third-party technology can be complex. Each integration point is another piece of software that needs development, testing, and maintaining. Also notice that the stack is wobbly. Any version change in one of the technology can cause the wobbly stack to tumble down. So how has Lansa addressed this high-level language requirement? Well, we think that rather than jumping between many languages and technologies that are involved in full stack development, we should allow the developers to define all the logic, all the functionality inside the low-code platform. For this, Lansa offers a high-level language called RDML, which stands for Rapid Development and Maintenance Language. Lansa's high-level language insulates developers from having to code for the underlying technical details, such as database or operating system specifics or browser device dependent code. We call this the plumbing code. Business application developers, in our opinion, should not have to deal with plumbing code. Lansa takes care of that instead. That's why we call it high-level language. We refer to this high-level language capability as hybrid low-code to indicate that we offer, on one hand, low-code model-driven development. On the other hand, we also offer a language. Hybrid low-code makes it a lot easier for programmers to adopt low-code in a way that lets them build real business applications with full control of a language that they are used to having. Business rule engine, the next criteria. Most development tools, and I'm not just talking about low code, but also traditional tools, don't offer a central place to define your business rules. That means that the business rules are duplicated over the programs, creating a maintenance headache, as well as inconsistencies. For example, different pricing rules or discount rules may apply, or maybe you get a slightly different error message when you run a specific validation. And even if the rules are applied consistently, updating them would be a major effort and may involve changing and recompiling many programs, with the risk, of course, that you forget one of them. The alternative is that the rules are duplicated, not in the programs, but they may be embedded in a database, in triggers. That means that companies will be locked into that database and cannot easily swap, for example, from SQL Anywhere to MySQL or any other database. Also, data integrity and quality is likely to suffer. Like one program may accept data values that another program cannot work with. So it's far from ideal. How has Lansa addressed this definition of the business rules? Well, with Lansa, it comes with a business rule engine. You can create and maintain your business rules centrally, completely separate from the program code, but also separate from the database. Now, what are the examples of business rules that you can put in this, well, let's call it repository, yeah? There's a whole list. There's table and column definitions, the validations, there's virtual fields, which you can also call formula fields or derived columns. There's triggers, stored procedures. There's all kinds of reusable components like graphical widgets that you can put on forms, buttons, videos, track bars. There's bitmaps, icons, XF controls. The list is endless. Multilingual definitions. We could hold a whole webinar just about Lansa's multilingual capabilities, but I won't delve into it now. Visualization rules, for instance, would you like to display a field as a drop down or as a radio button or maybe as a multi-line entry box? Help text, there's many things that you want to define centrally. There's a great architectural advantage to separate the rules from the rest of your code. It's a dramatically reduced maintenance effort. You only have to change a rule at one place. Also, easy onboarding of developers. They don't even have to be aware of the rules, and the rules still apply. The flip side of defining business rules is deploying these rules. Now with Lansa, the business rules are not only defined centrally and separately from the programs and database, they're also deployed separately. For the deployment of business rules, or rather the enforcement, if you want to call it like that, Lansa uses a data services layer. Now this layer consists of special data access programs that are generated by the business rule engine. And these programs encapsulate all of the rules and validations. And this data services layer sits in between your business applications and your data. Changes to a definition in the business rule engines is immediately reflected in the service layer. And this allows existing applications to enforce the new rules without being recompiled. Only the relevant program in the data service layer is recompiled. Next criteria, very important, cross-platform development. Now, most low-code tools claim to be cross-platform, but on closer inspection, that usually only means across browsers and across iPhone and Android. Changing server platforms or databases can be extremely disruptive or even completely impossible if your low-code platform locks you in. Today, you may be happy with on-premise or maybe with a specific cloud, but tomorrow you may want to move to another mix of platforms. You don't want to be locked in. Lansa, on the other hand, offers a huge range of cross-platform capabilities. Applications that you have developed with Lansa can be deployed across any hybrid mix of cloud and on-premise servers, including Windows, Linux, IBM I, and AWS or Azure. And they can also access all major databases, which is, actually another advantage of the separate data services layer that I showed you in the previous slide. Lansa developed applications are also mobile responsive out of the box, so they can be accessed from mobile, tablet, and desktop devices. It are especially our solution partners who heavily rely on these cross-platform capabilities. For example, one of our partners, they're called ACBS, they provide a banking package for syndicated loans. Now, some of their customers run on Windows, some run on Linux, and some run on IBM. And ACBS can support all these customers while maintaining a single set of source code. Of course, they test in multiple environments, but imagine to be able to support such a variety of platforms from a single deck of source code. Well, you may not have that need for multiple platforms at the same time, but you may want to change from one platform to another in the future. The next criterion is application frameworks. It's very important. So a framework is basically a conceptual structure. In software context, a framework gives you something on which to build. It is a quick start to developing a solution. Compare software development to building a house or a skyscraper or a boat. Now, different frameworks would apply, but in each case, the framework would provide a foundation. The simplest example of a framework is a CRUD template, a simple create, read, update, delete. But a good low-code platform provides frameworks well beyond such a simple CRUD template or wizard. Without the framework, developers are far less productive. Software applications consist of code related to the business logic and code related to the infrastructure or generic services, such as event handling, user interface management, job processing. This infrastructure code is usually the most detailed and tedious code to write, and therefore also the most error-prone. Frameworks provide this infrastructure, so developers, they don't have to spend their time on that. Also, without the framework, it's hard for developers to adopt an agile and iterative development approach. Application frameworks allow developers to just plug in smaller components. And when developers can work on smaller pieces of software, they can work faster and they're easier to develop, easier to test. What does Lansa offer in the area of application frameworks? Well, of course, we offer simple templates and wizards at the program level. Fawzy will show a few of those during his demonstration. But in addition to that, Lansa also offers application frameworks for much larger concepts. For example, it includes a framework for back office applications. It includes a search, filtered instance list, command tabs, and standard features like integration with Microsoft Office. Not only does such a framework provide a quick start, it's also based on best practice and makes it easier for developers to produce a quality solution. Lansa also offers kickstart source code solutions. So not just a wizard, but actual source code. For example, we offer source code, it's called Portalize, and it's the generic source code for a web portal. It includes kind of all the standard user features, such as log in, create an account, forgot password, update user profiles, set preferences, administrative features like managing user accounts, security settings, Google Analytics, security features. And this Portalize code has gone many times already through penetration testing, and we've used all that feedback to improve the portal. So it's a massive time save. We can just start to plug in your own specific business logic. Another source code offering is Commerce Edition, either B2B or B2C e-commerce and integration points with your ERP. And if you don't have an ERP, we offer ERP frameworks, which is a basic ERP solution. So these these frameworks kind of give you the best of both worlds. You're not confined to a package, but you also don't have to start from scratch. Next criterion, and the last one for now, the importance of integration. Well, the success of any application relies, among others, on how quick and how easy it is to integrate with other systems and solutions. Most low-code tools claim that they can integrate with anything. Well, that may be true, but unfortunately, they can only integrate in one way, which is using REST APIs. Now, although those REST APIs are architecturally perfect, you may not have the time or the skills to wrap an entire existing business solution with web services. It's extremely time consuming. Yeah, so it's very limiting to have only one option for integration. Lansa, on the other hand, we offer a variety of integration options. Of course, REST APIs, as I said, they're architecturally perfect, but we also offer direct database access. So you don't have to wrap everything with an API or other web services, or you can call DLLs or ActiveX or directly call .NET components. Other formats, FTP, integration with SMS and more. Also of critical importance is data mapping and transformation. Data may live in many different formats and sometimes needs to be mapped from one format to another. For example, from a CSV to a database or to EDI, to the EDI. Make sure that your low-code tool has the integration options that you need. Make sure you're not just confined to RESTful APIs. Handing over to Fawzy for the demonstration.
And thank you, Marjanna. And firstly, I'd just like to record my appreciation to you for spending your precious time with us this morning or afternoon, as the case may be. I hope you can see my screen. Has it been shared properly?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so I'll be demonstrating aspects of the 5 criteria or attributes that Marjanna has highlighted, and I'll do so in 3 parts. So I'll first show you a ready-made sample application that's shipped with Visual Lansa. And I'll draw your attention to certain characteristics of modern web applications. Then we'll show how we use a wizard in Lansa to generate a fully functional app, which if needed can then serve as the basis for further development. Finally, we'll show how you can do that further development within the same IDE by creating custom components that extend the generated app. Okay, so what you're looking at now, right, hopefully is the Visual Lansa IDE. So as with any development studio, it's made up of multiple panels. So the main area here is the home page. So where we have a build a mobile web application, which I'll just click on. So here you'll find various template options, right? So in Lansa, we refer to wizards as templates, right? So these are used to generate fully functional apps that can then be custom modified and extended from within the IDE if needed. There are also sample apps that are shipped with the tool, right? So there is a currency crypto exchange here, which where the information is actually retrieved from an external source. There is an e-commerce portal, the Lansa Tools company. So, and all the source code is accessible and available. Right? So let's take a look at one of these sample apps. I'll just pick one right at the top. Sorry, I've gone ahead of myself. Yes, this context table. Okay, it's running locally on my system right now. Okay, I'll just continue as guest. Sorry, my system is a bit slower. It's what happens when I'm doing demos on webinars. Okay, so it's appeared. So it's basically a simple application. So you have a list of contacts. So I'll just select one, Nina Schultz here, right? So you have information in panels that are nicely laid out, right? Okay, so if I were to place my cursor on an input field, yes, the caption color and the input box changes color. To click on a date field, then a nice date component pops up, right? So this would be somewhat familiar to you. And the reason is that it follows a standard design guideline, or to use its proper term, a design language that Google created for browser sites and applications, right, called material design. So material design is a standard that specifies how web pages should look and behave. So if you use YouTube or Gmail, then those are examples of apps that follow the standard. And it has been adopted on numerous sites. So modern web apps follow standards. So in Lansa, we have incorporated support for material design in Visual Lansa, and I'll demonstrate this a bit later. So I can click on settings here, right? I can change the color if I want. Context X, okay. So as you can see, you would also note that the app follows the single page application or SPA model, right? And SPA is one where only portions or elements of the page is refreshed when new data from the web server is received, okay. This is different from the default browser method where the entire page is reloaded. So the whole idea is to make the app feel just like a desktop app. Okay, I'll show you another example of modern web application. Right, so what I've just done is to change the dimensions of the browser to one of a mobile phone. So this is how the same app or the same page look and behave it was running in a mobile device. So you can see the left menu panel has totally disappeared. You can also see if I were to select a particular contact, again, that the panels have rearranged themselves. So I'll change to another device, which I can do by selecting this drop down across the top. So the browser is now in developer mode, right? So it's a feature in the Chrome browser, and with many browsers as well, they have this developer mode feature. So I can select different tablets as well. So they offer quite a number of options. I'll just select here. So this is now a Nest Hub, right? So you can see it's the same application, and same page, but behaving slightly differently, right? When running in different sized devices, right? So the app, right? So this is just the front end components, right? Having the intelligence, having the smarts to automatically reshape or adapt itself to the size of the device it's running on. So it's now acting. So it's now acting, for example, back again, right? So if I were to click on the menu side, it's acting as a slider here, right? So this technology is called responsive design, right? It's an approach to web design that makes your web page look good across devices, desktops, tablets, and mobile phones. So you do not need different modules or UI to run the application on diverse devices, right? Which is what was required in the past. So I'm showing my age now, but in the past, you had different markup languages, right? So same backend program, but different markup languages would be called, right? For different shaped devices. For example, we had WML, right? Wireless markup language, right? At the early days of XML, right? The XML age, right? So these are just a few characteristics of what a modern web site modern web application should behave and look, right? So what I'll do now is I'll just change back the browser back to the desktop mode. So, right, so next we'll be using a template to generate an app. So I'll come back to my Visual Lansa system here. So I will pick a template, right? The first one here. Okay, so from the Visual Lansa perspective, a web application consists of a number of components that will run either on the backend server or the front end, which is where the browser is, right? So right at the top here, you have a prefix, right? So you can specify a prefix, which is added to the component name. So as to easily identify the modules that belong to this application, right? Which we're about to generate. So the apps generated by this template, right, follows the single page application model, the SPA, so which I've described before. So now the portion of the web page that's refreshed is called views in Lansa. So an application typically contains multiple views. So in this template, there are 3 views that are specified by default. So you can, of course, choose to add more. So the first one here is named contacts, right? So again, contacts. And the purpose of this view is to maintain a database table. Now you have, in this drop-down here, we have other options, right? So you can have views which do other things as well. So I'll just stick to maintaining a database table. And the database table to be maintained is called xcontacts, right? And the user is allowed to create, read, and delete data. Okay, I'll just scroll down again, right? So there are other views as well, right? A contact us page, which is to display the organization contact details, right? And then we have a chart. So without further ado, I'll just generate this application here. So the wizard is, or the template is now generating the modules of this app, right? So again, front end components that run in the browser, and then modules that run in the backend server, right? So the modules are now being built as we speak. And as they are generated, they will then be compiled. Now to the top left here, sorry, not the top left, in the left panel here, you'll see the components that have been generated, right? So there are components, like I said, that run in the browser. And then there are, for example, here you have server modules. So as the name suggests, these are the modules that will run in the backend server. Okay, so the various components, there are a fair number of them are now being compiled. And once successfully compiled, they will then, what the template will then do as part of its process is then it will execute the successfully compiled. Okay, assuming it is successfully compiled, it will execute it in a browser straight off, right? So I'm now, so there in the bottom panel, you can see the components being created. Okay, so I'll sign in. Okay, so somewhat similar to the sample application. So you have a list of contacts. And then you have, again, the sample contact us detail, which talks with, which accesses Google Maps. And it has charts as well, right? And then you can have, click on charts and again, you have various charts. So I'll come back to contacts. And I will then select one of these contacts here. And so what I'll do now is basically I will remove the input for one of the fields, gender, and I will then click on save. And what happens now is that there is an error message popping up, as well as the fields, right, the field in question being highlighted in red. So this is actually the rules engine that Marjanna mentioned before, the rules engine in action. Right? So this validation occurs in that rules engine data services layer. So now the rules engine is actually, sorry, the rule is defined in the database table definition, right? So we've used X context in the template. So what I'll do now is I will come back to the Visual Lansa IDE. And I will look at the X context table here. Okay. So these are the fields that make up the record structure of this table, right? So under the rules and triggers tab, right, you have the list of validation rules that have been specified on the fields within this table, within this record here. So one of them being X context gender. So what I'll do is I'll just double click on it. So this is a list type rule, right? So in the list type rule, there are a number of types of validation rules that you can specify. For example, right, you can have a range check, lookup check, whereby you are looking at the data in another table, right? A simple check, a simple logic check, right? So a list check rule is basically where there is a list of acceptable values, right? So in the details tab to the left, you see male, female, and undisclosed are the 3 acceptable values for this field, right? So this rule is applied when you are inserting new records or when you are updating existing records, right? And if the value is in the list, then it will go on to check the next rule. If it's not, then it will return an error. And there you will see here at the bottom the message, the gender must be male or female undisclosed. So this rule, right, will be in place for any module that accesses this table. Right? So you do not have to code this validation in your programs. So this is part of the Lansa architecture, right? And this also automatically promotes sharing and reuse of logic, right? And then you can also, under cross references, for example, you can see the list of modules, components that makes use of this table. Okay, so without further ado, I'll go on to the third part of my demonstration, which is where I create a custom code, right? A custom module to add to what's already been generated. So, but before that, I just have to explain again, as Marjanna has mentioned. So Lansa is hybrid low code, right? So we have wizards and frameworks that's used to generate functional apps, right? But the problem is, what if the wizards or models are simply not there to generate a particular requirement or functionality, right? So with a lot of low-code tools, right, you need to go outside of the tool, right? You've got to go into Java or .NET, right, to create the modules which are then called from what's been generated. But with Lansa, everything can be done within the tool. So what I'm going to do next is to create that custom module, right? So I'll go back to the main web page here. Okay, so I'll have to explain the scenario, right? So sounds a bit frivolous, but it's the principle that matters. So on the surface, it's a simple program. I will type in the name of a city and get back the current temperature of that city, right? So for this, there will be an external call to web service API, right? Which will be done from the server module. So I'll be making use of an API offered by this site here called Weather Stack. Right. So it offers this particular functionality as a web service API, right? And it's been used by there's those number of happy customers. Right. So on the surface, simple, but behind the scene, there's actually a level of complexity. So I'll go back to the main web page here. So I'll click on this add view, right? So I'll call it temperature, right? So get a temperature, get temperature I'll generate this view. Okay, it's there now. I'll open up the view component, right? The view component here. It has a label by default. What I'll do now is that I will just make the label to fit the width of the component, right? And then I'll just give it a slightly different color there, temperature. Like I've mentioned before that Visual Lansa incorporates material design from Google, right? So if I go into controls here, right, you can see the list of components that adheres to the Google material standard, right? So what I'll do first is I will drag and drop this input box, right? Which is for the user to enter the city that he or she wants to find the temperature of. Again, as before, I'll specify that this control goes to the center, it's aligned to the top center and will flow down. And then I will put in a button, right? I'll put in a button. Okay, and as before as well, I'll align it to the top center and again flow down so it doesn't go over each other. Last but not least, for the sake of aesthetics, I'll just add a bit of buffer to it. Right. So caption, double click on it. I'll go into details here. And I'll just change the caption to city. And for the button, I'll change the caption to get temperature. And when the end user clicks on the button, right, this event is triggered. And inside here, so now I'm basically showing you the Lansa code itself, RDML that Marjanna mentioned as well, right? So as you can see, that there is a coding assistant that pops up, right? Very, very useful. So here I'm defining a call to a method, get temperature, which has not been defined yet. So I'll just, again, I'll call it get temperature. So this is a view control. So this is a control that will be running inside of a browser. So this view control will be calling a routine which is running in the backend server, right? So the module that's responsible for that is the server module. So I'll come back here. And what I'll do is I'll use an existing server module. Right? And in the interest of time, what I'll do is I will just copy and paste the code, right? So a quick description of the code here. So this is the server routine and it's expecting an input, right? An input. So this is coming down from the view control that I've just created, right? And it will pass in this cell location, selected location, and then it will output the return temperature, okay? And then you have a request object here, right? And this is when that request is sent to the weatherstackapi.com, right? So this is all you need to access an external web service, an external REST API. So once successful, it will return back here. And then I will read the contents of what WeatherStack returns back. And then I will simply pass back the information back to the view control, right? So this is all the code that you need. So I'll just compile it here. And I will then go back to the view to finish off the view control. Again, in the interest of time, I've got the code ready here. I'll just copy and paste it. Okay, so yeah, so it's called A07, right? That is the contact server that I'm using, right? So that is the get temp API server routine that was specified here. So I've come back here again. Right, so this is the code that I've copied in. Right, and then it will execute it. It will pass in the location that the user has entered, and then it will return a temperature, and then I will then basically just copy it to the label. Okay, so compile this. So at the bottom there, there's a panel showing the compilation. And the last step is for me to actually make the view accessible from the menu, right? So here I'll just click on this here. So, right, so I've created a view. Now, how do I make that view accessible from the menus, right? So this is what I'm doing now. So I click on this contact us menu item. I'll change this to temperature. I'll say this temperature will then call this particular view A07 temperature view. And I'll just change this to display position to one slightly up. And then I'll compile this. Successfully compiled. Now, I shall execute this. As you can see here, when I have the option of executing this application in various browsers, because with any web application, you need to test your application in different browsers. Okay, so the contacts list is called by default. And then temperature here, right? Okay, I'll choose Singapore. It's a bit warm now, but I can see clouds up there. So it's 30 degrees Celsius here in Singapore. And there in Sydney, as always, it's nice, comfortable 23 degrees Celsius. Okay, so yes, so that's how easy it is for you to extend and create custom modules with Lansa, right? It's all done within the same IDE. Okay, so I think with that, because I'm looking that we are very quickly approaching our 1 hour mark here. So I think what I'll do now is that's the end of my demo. I'll return the presentation back to Marjanna. Marjanna?
Thanks, Fawzy. Marjanna, did you have more to say, or? I think you might be muted.
Yeah, I unmuted myself now. That was exactly the case. I couldn't find the button. Okay, just to wrap up before we go into question and answer. Yes, give Lansa a try. You certainly won't be the first one. Here are just a few customer names, many of them in Asia Pacific, but also in Europe and America. The product originates from Australia, Asia Pacific, but nowadays our head office in America, but still the product is made in Australia, which is, you know, you support your region as well. If you want to have a further look on our website, you will find a number of videos, recorded webinars. Hopefully this webinar will be there as well in a few days' time, and white papers. Good. Going to the questions and answers. Malcolm, you can see them, I think.
Yes. So thank you, guys. That was really interesting and helpful. We've got a few questions through. Just remind everybody that if they have specific questions, you can still put them into the Q&A window. I see John just put one in a second. So I'll get to that one in a sec. But yeah, feel free to drop your questions in that Q&A panel. I won't specify whether you should answer this, Fawzy or Marjanna. You guys can decide who's best qualified to answer. But the first question up, John Burgess is asking whether the applications that you build need to be hosted in Lansa's particular hosting environment, or can customers host this wherever they like, in their data center or on AWS or wherever you like?
Yeah. The latter is the case. Lansa developed applications can be hosted on AWS or Azure. The company would themselves be responsible for contacting Azure or AWS with that. So we do not offer a hosted environment as such. You can run it in the cloud. It would be your own cloud instance. Or you can run it on premise, and on premise again, just quickly, that would be either Windows, Linux, or IBM.
Okay. Yeah. To be honest, the customers we've spoken to, that's actually a positive, that you're not bound to a specific hosting company. You can take it wherever you like, basically.
Absolutely. It may look easy in the beginning, but in the end, it's very limiting.
Yeah. Okay. So another question that's come through. Sorry, John, if that doesn't cover you, if I've misrepresented your question or not covered it all, but stick another one in and we'll ask it. In the meantime, another question that's come through is, during the presentation and during the demo, we saw web applications, and in the presentation we saw a mention about mobile applications, but does this still also apply to sort of desktop applications, like client server sort of applications as well?
Yes, and I can let Fawzy that answer in more detail. But yes, if you still have to support a client server application and you want your new programs to blend in with that, absolutely. Fawzy?
Yes, definitely. So with Visual Lansa, aside from developing mobile web applications, right? So you can also create, Windows desktop client server applications, right? All from within the one IDE.
Okay. And regardless of which one of those you're generating, I mean, the logic of it and the rules and the definitions are all coming out of that, all shared from that central repository.
Exactly. So that the rules engine still is in place, right? It's still in play. So irrespective of whether it's a web application, mobile web, or a desktop, right? And when accessing your database, right, it will go through that data services layer as well.
Okay. Another question, and I suspect this one's for Fawzy, just because it's sort of related to the demo. In the demo, we saw you calling out to a REST API and doing integration that way. In the slides, it suggested that there were other options, not just REST. What are those other options do you have for integration with other systems?
Well, the old classic way would be the web service, the SOAP web service as well, right? That is still in place, right? You still can use that. And Lansa also has its own other methods as well to access external services, or internal as well. So for example, in an SOA environment, right? In an SOA services-oriented architecture, right? So you have other means. You are not limited to just the standards. So with Lansa, you are flexible enough to be able to talk to different routines and procedures without adhering to a particular standard. So we can follow standards way of accessing services, and if need be, it's flexible enough so that you can come up with your own method, so to speak, of accessing these services or these procedures or routines.
Okay. I guess that kind of leads into one of the benefits, I guess, of there being that language behind the scenes, is that you're not just limited to drag and drop.
Yes, exactly. So you have the flexibility there, right? So
Okay.
you're not limited to, like with most low-code tools, you're limited or restricted to, the models or the templates that they provide. So anything other than that, you'd have to resort to, leaving the tool to go outside and coming up with their own solution, essentially.
Okay. And so if someone has, we've had this question before, if someone has got existing code that maybe they wrote in .NET, say, before they looked at Lansa, is that something that you're able to still access?
Yes, definitely, yes. So, for example, existing tables, existing databases, existing components, existing JavaScript for JavaScript objects, right? .NET objects, all of this can be sort of introduced into the Lansa system and be made use of by your Lansa programs as well.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I may be about to put you guys on the spot. I'm not sure, because these questions sometimes do. But one question that comes up a lot is in terms of how is this licensed? Like, is this per user, or is it per server, or like how do people actually pay for this?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. You have a choice, basically. Most of our customers opt for the server-based. So there is a license for developers, yeah, that's separate. But for deployment, you have a choice between server-based or user-based. Now, most of our customers choose server-based, and I'll give you a nice example. You can find a case study on our website. Bitfest was initially working with another low-code tool, and they only offered user-based pricing. And they started with that because they only had 3,000 or 4,000 suppliers, and they started with a kind of web solution to their suppliers. That was fine. Then they thought, oh, that's great. We use the same tool for an application to our customers, except they have tens of thousands of customers, and it became prohibitive pricing-wise. Yeah, so they actually had to stop that, and they redeveloped and came to us, because the server-based pricing was far more reasonable in that case when you have tens of thousands of customers. So you have a choice, is the answer.
Seems like we've lost Malcolm, I think.
Okay.
It could be the floods, right?
It could be the floods, yes. Well, I think we're close to the end anyhow.
Yes.
I'm having a look at the question and answer. I don't see any other ones, and we're going pretty much over time already.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions after this webinar, you can send them to info@lansa.com.au, and we will have a look at it and answer you as soon as we can. With that, Fawzy, anything?
No, nothing from me.
No?
So again, thank you very much for your time again.
Thank you as well.
Have a good day.
Okay.